Welcome to your weekly airplane news update. This is the week of May 23rd, 2022. We get 4 stories for you this week. The first one is the Spirit and JetBlue drama continues. We'll talk about the latest and greatest. We'll talk about Bombardier is coming up with a new aircraft, the Global 8000. We'll talk about ALPA that's rejecting boosting the retirement age for airline pilots. And then we'll talk about Republic Airways that is looking to get a 1,500-hour exemption. And I think these last 2 stories are really interesting about what's happening right now in the industry. So let's get to it. The first story this week is the continued saga between Spirit and JetBlue. If you haven't followed this, we talked about this for the last couple of weeks. Essentially, JetBlue is trying to acquire Spirit, but Spirit is not so interested because they're trying to merge with Frontier. And there's a battle that's been going on. A couple of weeks ago, JetBlue decided to launch a website, and they said that they were going to offer 60% higher for each of the share of Spirit. Now, Spirit is not so interested in a transaction because they're afraid that the deal is going to be stopped by the federal regulation with the antitrust regulation that's surrounding all of this. They think that the deal would just be too big and that the feds are not going to go for it. So the chairman of the board of directors for Spirit Airlines said JetBlue's tender offer has not addressed the core issue of the significant completion risk and insufficient protection for Spirit stakeholders. Essentially, they're afraid that this is going to end up somewhere in litigation for several months and that they won't be able to do anything in the meantime. What they really want to do is just merge with Frontier because there's no risks there of having anything related to antitrust. So it'll be interesting to see. I find it interesting that JetBlue decided to launch this website to share a bunch of information to kind of force the hand of Spirit. And it's just an interesting tactic. So we'll see what happens. We'll definitely keep you posted and when there is more. Next story is Bombardier is coming up with a new aircraft. It's called the Global 8000. This thing is supposed to be flying, 8,000 nautical miles. That's hence the name. And then the top speed would be Mach 0.94. Now, this is a fast aircraft, fast and pretty long range. They said that it would be the fastest and the longest range purpose-built business jet. And they were pretty proud of it. The chief executive officer, Eric Martel, said that the Global 8000 aircraft leveraged the outstanding attributes of the Global 7500 aircraft series, providing our customers with a flagship aircraft of a new era. So we can see the pictures, beautiful aircraft, and that's about this story. All right, the next 2 stories are interesting because they have to do with the pilot shortage. And ALPA, the Airline Pilot Association, says that they're not interested in trying to raise the retirement age for pilots, and they said that it will not have an effect on the current pilot shortage. Now, I want to mention that ALPA, for many years and still very recently, has said that there's no pilot shortage. They even went on to blame the executives at airlines and said that they mismanaged everything, and that's why there is a pilot shortage. And now they're coming back and said that raising the pilot age is not going to do anything. Now, I need to say that several years ago, the FAA decided to kick the retirement age from 60 to 65, and that's when everybody was afraid of the pilot shortage. So essentially what they did is kick the can down the line for 5 years, and then here we are again 5 years later. Now, it's actually more than 5 years later now, but with the same issue, and now they're trying to do the same thing, which didn't fix anything in the past. It just basically pushed down the problem 5 years down the line. And some people were talking about increasing it to 67 or 68. I think it's actually interesting that we have a retirement age. I think it's interesting that it's not based on any kind of standards. For example, a medical certificate standard or any kind of training standard, which is what we do for every other license, right? Why should somebody retire at 65 if they're still good to go until 67 or 68. But anyway, that's a different story. So ALPA says that the rumors are an attempt to divert the attention away from their mismanagement and the pandemic relief, and while attempting to weaken aviation safety. Now you can tell I'm not a big fan of ALPA because of their stance over the years that have been very contradictory and have been very selfish, quite frankly. All right, next story is Republic Airways is seeking a 1,500-hour exemption. Now, in order to get a ATP, an Airline Transport Pilot Certificate, you need to meet certain number of hour requirement, including 1,500 hours for most everyone. If you go through a degree program, it's 1,250. And if you come out of the military, it's less than that, 750. Now, Republic Airways is trying to do the same thing and tell the FAA that they're looking for an exemption where they can hire pilots to be captains into their aircraft at 750 hours. And what they're saying is that the training that they provide using their Lift Flight Academy matches or exceeds the standards for military pilots that are allowed to fly at 750 hours. Obviously, this 1,500-hour rule, which came several years ago, has put a big damper on people getting qualified to get to the airlines. When I was younger and at the point where I wanted to go with the airlines, you could go to the airlines with 500 hours, technically with 250 a commercial pilot certificates. And that 1,500-hour rule really did not help with the pilot shortage, even though I believe personally that it was based on something that, well, was far beyond 1,500 hours. The issue came from a crash that had happened where the pilots had way more than 1,500 hours of experience, but still we were stuck with this rule, and I don't think it's really done much for the industry. But that's all we have here for you this week. As always, like, subscribe, leave your comments, and I'll talk to you next week.